Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for FourCast is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
What sort of future do you think we're heading for? How will we live as we slip into the 21st century?
Welcome to FourCast, episode 48. I'm Tom Merritt.
And I'm Scott Johnson.
And we are once again gazing off into the future with a couple of guests. Joining us today from the Washington Center for Politics and Journalism, Terry Michael. Welcome to the show, Terry.
Thank you, Tom.
It's good to see you. I was actually a part of the internships that the WCPJ puts together back in 1993. Terry was nice enough to accept me and put me at NPR for 4 months, some of the most memorable months of my life. So I want to take the opportunity to thank you again for that.
Well, you're very welcome. You decided to make money instead of being a political reporter. It was a good decision on your part.
Well, I went to be a tech reporter, so I'm not making that much more.
Well, okay. More money than political reporters are making. You have a job, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. Also joining us is Scott McGrew from NBC San Francisco, host of Press Here. You can find his work at scottmcgrew.net. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you for having me. As a geek, I am just so excited to be in this room. I've watched this video a million times, and it's much more fantastic than I would have expected.
Yeah, it's a smaller on the inside, though, isn't it?
It always is.
Yeah,
it always is. Just like the Carson set. The Carson
Totally.
set's the same way.
Always the way with video. Well, Scott, we have two Scotts today, so when I say Scott, you both answer. That's fine. Let's start off with a prediction from a listener. We got this one. And he didn't sign it. See, now this is the
His
thing,
name was Scott.
People. When you send us your email, morally, you got to sign it in the email, else I have to go back and look it up, and then I'm going to take a long time and take you to task on the show. In number 44, we heard a prediction that you can keep your brain. I would like to give you my own take on this. I predict that within 50 years, we will be able to grow new bodies complete with brain and transfer our conscious to them temporarily, a la Avatar, for recreational purposes or permanently to extend an individual's lifespan indefinitely as long as the money holds out. This will be an expensive process reserved for the very rich and for politicians. After all, it takes 6 years of VAT time to grow a new body, and that fact will precipitate massive armed uprisings as the poor and middle class realize that once again, the oligarchy has screwed them, but that this time their lives are directly on the line.
Well, we like these kinds of predictions from our listeners, but they always seem to devolve into what society does with these terrible ideas. And I like that about our listeners. I like that they're always thinking about social impact and what it means if something like this were to be created. It isn't as simple and as clear-cut as one might hope. We'll see, though. I hope I have enough money to preserve my brain in such a manner. I like that he's got it figured out. What, 6 years of VAT time?
Yeah, 6
He's
years
got the whole thing,
maturation.
and I assume that's not value-added tax. That's sitting in a tank, right?
Probably.
Yeah, okay.
He didn't capitalize it.
No,
so,
okay. Yeah, so he's got this figured out from the get-go. He's got the problem, he's got the answer, and the end of man all in the question.
Terry, what would this do to campaigns if politicians could just grow new bodies?
Oh, God, I don't know. Apparently, it's more and more important that you have a good body without a brain. Sarah Palin comes to mind, and this candidate in Delaware. So I think it might politics could further devolve, as a matter of fact.
So it becomes even more about appearances in the world that Morley is imagining. I don't think that's a big surprise.
Apparently, that's all it takes for some people is just, does she cute or is he good looking? Does he have industrial strength hair? I'm thinking Mitt Romney. So we'll see. I don't know. I still think ideas matter, though.
Yeah.
Having accidentally touched Mitt Romney's hair once, I can actually say to the world that it's true. He has industrial strength hair. He really does. He was walking. I was above him at a stadium. This was during the Olympics here in Salt Lake City. He walked past and kind of went downstairs past me, and his head brushed my forearm. And my thought was, that's some stiff hair that man has. So
did it actually scratch you, or?
No, it didn't leave a mark. Didn't draw blood. Like a nails on chalkboard sound. It was a little creepy, I have to admit. I kind of just was like, ugh. But yeah, that was an experience. So yes, you have correctly predicted the present, which is his hair is something else.
Like Morley, you can send us your predictions. Email fourcastpodcast@gmail.com or just post them up on our blog at fourcastpodcast.com. Do sign them in line, though, so I don't have to dance around while I try to figure out what your name is. On to the short-term predictions. These are things that will happen sooner than later, maybe in the next, I don't know, few years. Let's start with you, Scott McGrew.
Sure.
What do you see in the short term?
All right. Well, I work in media, and I know a lot of the listeners, a lot of the viewers are going to agree with me, so I don't know how radical this is, how amazing. Oh, thank God you had him as a guest. But I think owning entertainment has got about a year left, a year and a half left.
You mean like DVDs?
Yeah, and I don't even mean the physical matter so much as I mean if I have children, and if you want to watch Dora the Explorer, you don't have to buy Dora the Explorer anymore. I mean, it's on Netflix on demand. And I can get that on my iPad. I can get that on my iPhone. I can get that in every computer in the house. I can get it through the Wii, the Xbox, and the PlayStation. So Dora is wherever we want her to be. And so why would I ever buy a Dora DVD? I'm not saying not pay for entertainment, but why would you ever? It just follows you. Why would you buy a CD when you like Ingrid Michaelson, Pandora? And you'll have all the Ingrid Michaelson you'll ever need to want to have, and I think that's the sheer amount of choice you'll have is just phenomenal, and I think it's 12 months.
12 months.
Sure.
Because I'm with you on this prediction. I think it's going to happen. I've been saying this for years that once you get enough internet connectivity and enough bandwidth, there's no reason to download anything anymore, and we actually go back to the way things worked when you had minstrels traveling around doing shows.
Just following you, just saying, what do you want to listen to now?
In your case, yes.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But no, the idea of like you didn't have physical media, right? You had to have somebody perform it, and you didn't have to have DRM back in those days.
And I'm taking it one step further than just everything will be digital. I'm saying everything will just always be available whenever you want. You'll have to pay for it.
Yeah, you pay for a service that just gives you access to everything that's there.
Yeah, my Pandora, my Netflix follows. I could be watching a movie right now. And
I don't know if quite a year is enough.
You'll still have DVDs in your house and whatnot, but I think a vast majority of that stuff will just come, 2 years. There you go.
Well, the slowdown is always just the slow burn to move to something like that. So it's always been this issue of like, okay, well, great. If we come up with alternative energy sources to run our cars, how long will it take us before we get away from, having service stations? Well, that's a big deal because that impacts a huge portion of the economy, and it affects distribution. It affects point of sale. It affects all of these different parts of the economy that could collapse in on themselves and then cause sort of a ricochet effect through the rest of the economy. So people always worry about that. When it comes to entertainment, it seems like there's a bit of that going on too. There's a huge distribution middle to all of this that goes away. Distribution becomes purely digital, and it becomes, point to point, becomes peer to peer, however it becomes, but it eliminates trucking and management and hundreds of thousands of people at different points of production all the way through sale that makes that a lot harder. So it feels like the way we get to these things is we kind of accidentally fumble into it. So Netflix comes along and changes the way we rent movies. And so it's a slow burn to see Blockbuster and others kind of tank.
Right.
But it took a long time. And now that that's kind of happening, and Netflix says, well, what about this digital thing? We want to get on that early. And so they kind of create these little wrinkles that make this slow thing happen. So I feel like it's a little farther off. Maybe a couple of years, I think, is probably about right, where it's dominant. But I am with Tom and you. This is long time coming and needs to happen sooner than later.
What about you, Terry? Is this a future you want to live in?
Oh, I want to live in any future, as a matter of fact, at my age. So.
Does it really matter to you whether you can own your entertainment or not?
The problem as you get older is creating software in your brain to get over your existential angst. So that's my problem right now at the age of 63. Am I bored? Will I be bored? Do I really want to live forever?
Well, and you're a little different than the Scots and myself in that I'm guessing you probably don't consume television and movies in the amounts that we do.
I might go to one movie every 2 years. Hardly ever look at a DVD version of a movie. Once, maybe twice a year, I'll do direct TV movie. No, I still read. I'm still, I'm getting away from my ink on dead trees. I canceled my New York Times subscription. That was $750 worth of paper on my front porch that I couldn't get turned off when I traveled whenever I wanted to. And I don't miss it. I just do my $1.99 iPhone app and my iPad app and read the New York Times online now.
All right.
It's my I just take the iPad with me to lunch. I still read my Washington Post by ink on dead trees.
Let's turn to your short-term prediction then. What do you see happening in the next few years?
In 3 to 5 years, no more than 10, all of that black liquid under that sand in the Middle East is going to be worthless. Now, in the interim, it'll be cost-effective alternative fuels, but then we're going to have all the cheap nano-engineered energy that we want. I've been making that prediction for 2 or 3 years to my students, and they look at me like I'm crazy because they haven't read Ray Kurzweil, who at the beginning of the book says the future is widely misunderstood. You could take that as a glib phrase, but I take it as meaning that our industrial era programmed brains just have no concept of the warp speed at which intellectual advancement and technological change is taking place. So I think that we're really headed for a very different kind of politics because that Middle East oil is no longer going to keep us captive.
Well, and that's a really interesting point because what you're saying is we don't even hit peak oil, or it doesn't matter if we hit peak oil, and it changes the entire dynamics of the energy conversation.
Oh, absolutely. I think that there are a lot of reasons that we are in permanent wars. The whole American exceptionalist idea has driven us into that. Madison warned us against it 200 years ago, that a perpetual state of war infringes on our liberty. Eisenhower warned about the military-industrial complex. But oil has been a driving force behind all of the worldwide turmoil that comes out of the Middle East and that commodity. So it will be a wonderful thing that technology can do for us, that we can break that habit of being reliant on that Middle East oil.
Well, and I think Terry's... I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
No, go ahead. Scott, visiting Scott beats regular Scott.
Well, you got two pair. I think Terry's right that whether the oil thing turns out to be true or not, people have this vast underestimation of how fast things change and how quickly and how unexpectedly.
And there are a
million examples in history. 9/11 would be one of them, where you just a bolt out of the blue, and the whole world changes in some fashion. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. But people underestimate the amazingness of a change.
Well, I think that Kurzweil has it exactly right when he talks about how 12,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers, to really the Age of Reason, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Era, just 200 or 300 years ago, progress was really just flatlined. And then the Industrial Era sort of allowed us to progress after we got the original database of the book to transmit thought through time at an upward curve. But now it's this way, geometrically upward.
It just seems like I keep going back to this theme on this show, not just this episode, but all the time. This issue of if this happens in 3 to 5 years, and by the way, I'm all for it, to become undependent on the black goo underneath the sand would be a wonderful thing, I think, for humanity.
It's oil, by the way, just in case, because we sort of...
Oh, thank you. Tom
Texas tea.
So, I want to make sure the audience understands.
It's a mysterious black goo. I thought we were talking about Spider-Man.
Texas tea, yes.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, but I always go back to this thing where if it's a sudden change, and in 3, 4, or 5 years, I still think would be considered a fairly sudden change, doesn't that just collapse half the world's economy or ability to sort of adjust to a new world way of dealing with energy? Doesn't it kind of put everybody in peril that way? Not just them, but the ripple effect of something like that would just tear everybody up until there is the slow burn through what we've already got, use it up as best we can, slowly roll out new ways of doing things and new ways of giving jobs to people who previously would have had jobs under the old way. How does one reconcile that in your mind?
That depends on what you mean by slow. Evolutionary change might have meant 100 years. It might have been 1 billion years. It's now evolution. We can evolve in 2 or 3 years. So 3 to 5 years is plenty of time for us to adapt, as a matter of fact. because the changing nature of time, how we think of time, is such that a generation now is no longer 21 years. It's more like 2.1 years.
You guys are really deep. Can I take back my Dora the Explorer example?
Yeah, the chat room's complaining we're too serious after your Dora the Explorer example. But no, I think this is a great prediction. But and what I like, Terry, is you're not saying particularly what. It could be nanotechnology, it could be fusion, it could be solar. Who knows what it is? But the idea that the conditions are right, that somehow we are going to come across some new energy source that's going to really revolutionize what we do is very possible. And the singularity is near and all that. You don't even have to buy into that to see how there are so many different technologies that are candidates for this and have been for so long that it's not unlikely that one of them would catch fire and suddenly provide the kind of energy we need. And I'd say to Scott Johnson that we would actually help the economy more than hurt it if we had prodigious energy, because it's one of the things impeding development in a lot of countries is the lack of the funds to be able to take advantage of energy. Maybe this new energy wouldn't be cheap, though. I guess that could be the devastating factor of it.
Yeah, and the issue of suddenness in my mind comes from this idea that what we've seen so far to try to compete with oil isn't sustainable, and ultimately oil isn't sustainable. It's just a longer haul. But all these other technologies that come along to say, all right, we're going to burn corn and that'll work, or we're going to do this and that'll work, or wind power, and everybody says, yeah, but so this little town benefits, but on a larger scale, this is not scalable. It's like dealing with servers and websites even. You always run into these issues. And until somebody finds something truly scalable and sustainable, I guess that would be the one that would be big enough to not only be sudden, but also not, that may actually end up helping everybody in the end. I still think there'd be a major freak out. I mean, if you suddenly had a technology and 2 months later, nobody needed oil, that's maybe pushing it. But if that suddenly happened, it seemed like a pretty crazy world for that couple of months to me.
I think it'd be a good freak out, though. I think it would be a kind of like an internet type freak out. And you'd have a lot of people holding off like, I'm not going with that new nano engine for my car. My gas burner has got me here. That's where I'm sticking.
Yeah. Kids these days.
Let's move on to the long-term predictions. These are the longer view, the more in 100 years we'll all be in flying cars, or we'll all just be flying sorts of predictions. And Terry, let's stay with you. What do you see in your long-term view?
Well, again, you got to know what you mean by long-term. But let's say 3, 4, 5 decades. I think that we're going to that wireless is going to have an all-new meaning. We're going to think our way to the net. Hotspots are going to be everywhere. Everywhere is going to be a hotspot. And my contact lenses that I have in right now are going to have onboard computers, so I'm not going to need any virtual reality goggles to see my way onto the World Wide Web, or whatever we're going to call it at that time. I think we're already seeing the ability to record brainwaves and use those digital files as commands is already being seen. Some really interesting research took place with people in comas. They were told, as they were talked to as though they were awake, that if your answer is yes, think tennis. If your answer is no, think bowling. And then they asked them questions, and it was amazing. There were quite a few of those people who were thought to be in comas that thought tennis and thought bowling and gave the right yes or no answer. So we're going to think our way to the internet within a few decades.
And how could they tell that they were thinking?
That's a good idea, but
yeah, right. How could they tell they were thinking tennis or bowling? Was it just that those words are different enough that they saw different signals coming out of the brain?
Yes, exactly. In other words, the brain wave for thinking tennis was different from the brain wave for bowling, and they recorded those waves, and then were able to realize what the person was thinking, since the person obviously couldn't move his or her lips or respond in any conventional way. It was kind of frightening to think that maybe people who are in comas actually are aware.
I would be the single worst patient in this study, because as a kid, my brother and I used to set up bowling pins that we found at a garage sale, and we'd knock them over by tennis balls at them. So they wouldn't know what I was thinking. That'd be terrible.
Think tennis bowling. Now think bowling for tennis. Damn it, Johnson. Hopefully that you'll never have to participate in that study. But
may you not be in a coma.
Yeah.
But
we've seen this, right? We've seen a lot of. We've even seen that toy that's out where you just think levitate and the ball levitates.
Yeah.
So we're not that far away from this.
There is a company, and I wish I could think of it, in Silicon Valley that I did it with a demo where you lift it's virtual. I mean, but you still have the thing on your head and you're lifting a cube or something like that, and it works. I mean, it really works. It's phenomenal. And that's just the early beginnings of this.
Well, and this ties back to your prediction earlier, Scott, which is the idea that we have wireless everywhere and internet everywhere, so that we don't need to download videos anymore.
Right.
Eventually leads to us having wireless everywhere, and we don't have to connect anything. We don't have to connect a computer to the internet. We just put it in everything. We put it in our contacts, and then we add this new input system.
And I've read somewhere that the guy who's going to make a lot of money off of that is the one that can filter. If you have full-time access to everything in the planet, it'll be the person. Twitter does this to a certain degree because you follow certain people and you trust their judgment. But the person who filters all that information for you becomes the most valuable person in a 1,000-channel world. The
in
TV
journalism,
guy.
we call those people editors.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Writers don't like them.
Yeah, but it's an important point, right? The portal of the 1990s was thought to be the great way to make the web useful.
Right.
They never really got it right, because there just wasn't enough to portal to, I don't think, at that point.
Right. And now that there is, I think the person who says, listen, you can only watch one TV show at a time, this is the TV show to watch. I know who you are. I know what you like. Do this. And I mean that in a positive way, not in some creepy, following me around with cookies sort of way. But this is the article you'll think is most interesting, etc. That will be very valuable to people.
Terry, have you thought?
That's why journalism is going to survive, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Because people want editors. People want to have all of this massive amount of data vetted, and that's the business model that we're going to see that allows people in the business of doing serious reporting to survive. They're not going to transmit it with ink on dead trees. We're going to find a way to get people to pay for that. And we're just in a transition period right now. The reports of the rumors of the death of journalism are grossly overstated.
We were over-provisioned with journalism for the internet because every town had its own newspapers, television, radio stations, because you couldn't get them from outside. Now you can. So not every news organization has to send somebody overseas to report on what's happening overseas.
That's been an interesting.
That's right. As a matter of fact, that the papers that really are doing fairly well now are the local papers, because the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Chicago Tribune, they don't really want to cover what happens in my hometown of Mount Vernon, Illinois, population 18,000. Who died, who was born.
But so WMIX will.
WMIX will absolutely be interested in that I guess 5,000-watt radio station in my hometown. Those people are going to do well because there's a niche market for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that market is not going away. It's just all of the forms for delivering everything have collapsed into one. Everybody can do video and print and everything all at once. Let's turn to you, Scott McGrew, on long-term predictions. What do you see when you look farther out?
Long-term, here's the headline, and then I'll go back and explain it. VR as religion. Virtual reality as religion. You go back 8 years to the Sega Dreamcast or whatever happens to be, and you compare that to where we are with an Xbox 360 on a big 50-inch plasma, that kind of thing. 8 years. I'm making it was 8. Does that sound about right? 10, somewhere in there. Whatever.
Probably around 10. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that from Dreamcast, which was awesome, all the way up to Xbox 360 in 10 years, and Xbox 3, and then Xbox 4.
And Xbox 360 is a few years old now.
Yes, it is, and PlayStation and everything else. So if we can move that fast with this sort of a display, then the virtual reality, the Star Trek. holodeck is within what was our timeline? 100 years, something like that.
Yeah,
easily within 100 years. Okay, so
23rd century, right?
Yeah,
20, whatever it was. Yeah,
100
23rd.
So there will be two groups. I mean, there will be those who never leave the holodeck, and then those who are so probably rightfully afraid of it that it will become essentially religiously unacceptable. That will be don't do that.
Taboo.
Taboo. I mean, there are already people who say, I won't let my children play video games. I think there will be a huge segment of the population that will say, this holodeck idea is so frightening. And it is. I mean, it's sort of the brave new
deck.
world. Yes. That not only will people resist that idea, but there will be a subset of people who will be religiously against it, and they'll incorporate it into religion. The Amish of holodecks will be a fairly big segment of the population, people who will never walk into it.
I got to give props to Scott number 2 today for the Dreamcast shout out, because I was a huge fan as well. Nothing wrong with the Dreamcast. And I've actually been saying for years, okay, so here we are. And the 360's been out since 2005, I'll remind people. So it's been a while. And they're not, there's arguments about why they're taking so long to get to next-gen console announces, and it's because
it's still awesome.
Yeah, it's still awesome, and they don't feel like they're going to make that much of a quantum leap in the next generation, so they'll wait for whatever that leap is. But regardless of that whole argument, I've said for years, well, wait, we have had since, I would argue, Dreamcast, the technology to do some really, really cool virtual reality stuff, and nobody stepped up to do it. So before, back in the old Super Nintendo Genesis days, people were touting these helmets, and yeah, this is going to work with your Genesis, and it's going to be awesome, and everyone's going to freak out, and it'll change the way we interact. And then they all realize, well, these graphics are terrible, and this is a bad idea right now. And nobody's picked up the torch. Like, I don't understand what's going on. In 2010, we should be wearing these things. They should be cheap, and Apple should have one or something. And we should all be doing this thing right now. We have the graphical technology, real-time, world-generating technology to do it, and we've somehow just decided this isn't cool anymore, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, I really still thinking about this religious war over virtual reality, because
well, think of
it takes less than that right now to get people going at each other.
So I mean, if you really had a holodeck on the Enterprise, nobody would do anything. I mean, why would you leave the holodeck ever? You know, and so
because your holodeck credits would run out. That would be the only reason.
As we all know, it would break, and then there'd be some.
Well, and it goes wrong, and the bullets become real, and then you have to get Data as Sherlock Holmes to save you.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes, and Moriarty and all everything. But why would you leave the holodeck? Therefore, it's going to be very destructive to society. Therefore, some segment of society is going to say, we will not participate in the destruction of society, to the point where it becomes absolutely adamant, more than just a, hey, this is a kind of a rule of thumb we have, but rather a kosherness of it.
And and I think this ties into your prediction as well, Terry, which is the idea that we would, be able to connect right from our brain to the internet is probably going to produce a backlash as well.
Yeah. Well, let me pivot off this whole idea of this question of what we're going to seek as religion. The shared stories that we've been sharing for a few thousand years, Christianity or Islam or Judaism, are sort of giving way to a lot of different shared stories. And there are a lot more skeptics out there, a lot more. There's a growth on the planet of the number of people who are atheists, not just the number of people who subscribe to traditional religion. People, the yearning for meaning of what is this all about, it's really going to become really intense. And there are going to be a whole lot of different religions out there. And the whole idea, as I've alluded to before, that we're going to try to figure out some way to keep ourselves entertained. When we are self-conscious beings, and we're going to wonder, what can keep us entertained for more than a few minutes? When we understand the backstory of everything that's going on so much better than we ever did before. We're not going to live by the same old myths. We're going to have to create a lot of new myths in order to get through this existential angst.
So not just one anti-virtual reality religion, but schisms on both sides of the issue. I think you're right. It'd be a much more complex response, and I think not just to virtual reality, but to any kind of technology or even entertainments.
Yeah, there are religions or groups who are devoted to the idea that smoking lots and lots of pot or doing lots and lots of PCP are really religious experiences, that is a religion. That is their way to touch the spiritual realm or whatever. And so the idea that we could get to a point where technology is less about there's technology and then there's not, but that everything's somehow technologically based, and a holodeck comes along, you could easily see a bunch of people be completely freaked out about that, like Scott says.
Well,
but there's going to be a ton of people who see that as like their way of going beyond this coil and make it almost their own little religion.
No, Scott, that's an excellent point, and one I hadn't thought of. I thought of the religious intolerance of the holodeck, and I'd be one of them probably, who said, listen, folks, too much is going to destroy society if nobody's going to go to work, or doctors are not going to treat patients because they're in the holodeck. But Scott, that's a good point that I hadn't thought of. There will be people who use the holodeck for a religious experience.
Yeah, right.
Why wouldn't you? I mean, of course you would. To have that sudden spiritual effect on your group of followers.
Yeah.
And maybe for the first time, an actual, albeit artificial, for some people, their first real religious experience. I mean, if you get into a holodeck and say, all right, run the Buddha versus Jesus fight simulation, and in comes your two favorite religious heads, and they have a fight, and at the end you're shaking hands with, these beings that are just as real to you because you're in this fake world. I mean, that's, I'm just saying, that's more religious than maybe some would argue on the other side.
Interesting.
A lot of the people who are critics of the blogosphere out there are saying we need traditional journalism to give us a shared story, something we can share around the water cooler. Well, it's going to be harder and harder to have a shared story. We're going to sort of devolve into a kind of almost madness if we don't find some way to, at least in a small community of us, create our own shared stories. We're going to have a lot more cults than religions. Of course, the definition of a cult is a religion less than 200 years old. We're going to have the definition of a cult in the future, maybe something less than 20 minutes old.
Yeah, and those shared stories become more local as you realize, well, wait, not everybody's watching the same TV show at the same time. Not everybody's reading the same source of news. But you can always talk about the weather. You can always talk about, that pothole down at 4th and Main.
On the other hand, technology...
I was at a bar, not unusual for me, on Capitol Hill, as a matter of fact, last night, and I asked this 24-year-old bartender, I said, what's the iconic for your generation? For my generation, it was civil rights and the Vietnam War. And we had a few musical groups, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or acid rock, that we had was our shared story. And he just thought a while, and he said, well, I don't know. And I asked him, were the Killers? And he then gave me an answer about what he didn't really like, the big pop sound. And I suspect that in his generation, you couldn't come up with an answer. Who's your favorite band? Who's your favorite musical group? He kind of mused out loud. Maybe it was Columbine. We all were scared to death that we're going to die when we went to school, but he really didn't have an answer for it.
Though, Terry, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if you had created this double rainbow meme or something like that, it would not be, if you ask anyone 20 years old tell me about the double rainbow or whatever, they'd know instantly what you were talking about from one coast all the way to the other. So, it does work both ways in that sense.
And I would have absolutely no idea what you were talking about.
Right.
I don't have any idea what you're talking about.
Well, it's awesome. Yes.
It's so awesome.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what it means, though. All right, let's move on to our crazy-ass predictions. One that's really far out there, something like in 2,000 years we'll be made of cheese or something. It doesn't have to be that prediction, though. And Scott, we'll stick with you. What is your craziest prediction?
Well, I thought about a couple, and I think this one kind of fits in with some of the discussions you've had in the past about water. If we are filling up the earth with people, and if we need to grow food for all these people, we have Earth, it's just underwater. So draining the Atlantic Ocean, because there are beautiful mountains, beautiful valleys. I don't know exactly where you put the water that was in the Atlantic Ocean.
I want to see the EPA report on that.
Yeah,
but
okay,
all right, go ahead.
But because you have force fields, because it's 1,000 years in the future, right?
Okay.
So you do the force field around the Greenland, Iceland, sort of up at the top, and one down at the bottom, and then a really big pump, I guess. And you drain the Atlantic Ocean. And then you have a tremendous amount of very fertile, available earth for people to live and grow crops and everything else. And I don't know you didn't double the size of the earth, but a significant percentage of this new continent.
might, yeah.
Yeah, this new continent that stands between Europe and America.
And when you say new continent, is it a new continent or is it a bridge?
Well, it's a really deep valley. That's for sure.
So, but there's no more water around.
Right. Yes.
It, right?
Exactly. So you walk out of Boston and you go downhill,
Right.
until you get to the bottom, I guess, and
the need for this is population or just
it's more
because we could do it.
We could because we got force fields.
Yeah.
And
why not?
My one
force fields.
Right. My one problem is I don't know what the technology is in which there are a significant number of gallons of water in the Atlantic Ocean. Where you put that, I'm not exactly sure.
Well,
but
hopefully by then we'll have gone from global warming to another ice age. You can just freeze it and store it up at the poles. Yeah.
Yeah, you can stack it until the Earth is kind of wobbly.
Right. Well, so I guess you have to add it to both poles.
Like a big SUV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make sure you balance it out. I love this prediction. Don't get me wrong. I have no idea why we would do it.
Nor do I.
Except
because,
that it's
we need more space.
Freaking cool.
Yeah. When you fill up Texas, now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. I've always thought about this idea of, in the not so good Superman revival that we had a few years ago, they kind of had this idea. So Lex Luthor gets this big chunk of land built out of these magic space crystals that came from Superman's joint, and put this thing out in the middle of the ocean, and they were going to build this huge fortress, and it was all made of crystals and kind of difficult to live on. You couldn't really grow anything there, but the idea has always appealed to me. It's a lot like our own Australia. We just plop it down between the two continents, fill it with prison colonists, let it eventually become a really cool country in its own right. I like your future.
And make it a reality TV show.
HBD points out you could send the water to Mars.
Yes, you could, because
then you start
they need water. They need guitars, and they need water.
And women.
And women.
The three essentials if you're a Martian. Terry, do you have anything to add to the Great Atlantic draining?
I don't know. I don't know whether we're going to need to move ourselves physically. We could just sort of beam ourselves up.
Yeah. In other words, we'd leave the planet before we'd ever terraform the Atlantic.
Maybe.
I think it might be the people left behind after everyone gets off the planet because they're kind of bored. And
why go all the way to Mars when you've got if you could drain the Atlantic Ocean, you've got oxygen, you've got fertile ground, and you've got a really big wall of water, and you got to hope that somebody paid the force field bill.
That's so cool looking now.
Yeah, that would be awesome though. Just go up to this thing, ding, ding, ding. There'd be fish on the other side.
Well, yeah. Think of the aquariums.
Oh, it'd be awesome.
Yeah,
yeah. Think of the Marianas Trench on that side of the. So that'd be like the Grand Canyon 2.
I think what you do is you actually have huge walls of water between the force fields.
Yeah.
So that instead of rivers, you have these these huge things where the water actually goes up higher than it does now. So you don't have to put the water anywhere.
Oh,
and
I
you
see.
maintain some of the sea life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's also an attraction.
Yeah.
The great seawall of Atlantica.
We could find some guy named Moses. He could run the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's good at that sort of thing. All right, Terry. The crazy gauntlet has been thrown down. What is your craziest prediction, whether it's far away or near or otherwise?
Well, I want to tell you, your first emailer just stole my damn prediction. Damn your first caller.
Is that right?
I'm 63 years old, and in the next 3 or 4 decades, when I'm in my 90s or 100, by the time I reach that point, and I'll have a lot of replacement body parts, I'm going to be able to instantiate the contents of my brain into the nano-engineered body of my choice. I've been telling my students that for the last 5 years. Again, it's Ray Kurzweil. He's the source of all crazy future predictions, as a matter of fact.
True enough.
But now I'm going to have a real problem. I don't know how old I want that nano-engineered body to be. I think maybe around 30 is kind of what I'm guessing, and I've got to start collecting DNA for exactly the perfect nano-engineered body of my choice. But Kurzweil believes, of course, that by the time we're the same age, that he is going to be able to, if he keeps himself alive. His father had a heart attack and died around the age of 50. He takes about 200 supplements a day, I'm told, that he's going to be able to instantiate the contents of his brain. After making backup copies on what kind of storage medium is available in the next 2 or 3 decades, it's going to be a real problem. It's not easy to reverse engineer the brain, but if we can think it, we can do it. All the history of all the crazy-ass predictions of the last 100 years, all of the have really come true. And so, because basically we're just information. And, this headset is just information, keeping together those atoms. So if we can think we can do it.
Now,
at least I hope there. Again, my problem is going to be, what am I going to do with that time? The next 400 or 500 years.
well, and
You
also,
need Netflix.
What do we may need to drain the Atlantic, because if we have everybody going from body to body, the population is going to get huge.
I think that the problem is that we have a lot more space than we think we have. Do you know that you could put the entire population of the planet in Texas with room to spare? Also, there was a great book written recently. I get all of my book cues from the Colbert Report and the Daily Show. But it was really putting down this idea that the population is going to explode. In fact, in the next 3 or 4 decades, the population will level off. As people get smarter, as they get more money, they have fewer children. We're not going to see a problem with overpopulation.
I read that somewhere, Terry, too, and it was an interesting statistic, and I think we're talking about the same one. If you had the population density of San Francisco, and not everybody would want to live in San Francisco in that population, but if you did, you could get everybody in Texas. Everybody.
It would just
on
be
the
a
planet.
huge megalopolis.
Yes,
of a
it would.
city,
And,
right?
but
yeah.
I mean, when you talk about this population explosion, et cetera, you think, oh, wait a minute, now maybe we do have some room. Yeah.
We
you
probably do
wouldn't
have some room to
that
spread
oil
around.
very far, as a matter of fact. The oil will be right there in Texas.
The oil you don't need anymore, though, because you got the
That's
nanotech.
exactly.
But
You don't need it.
I'm impressed that I learned 2 things today. One, that we could fit everybody in Texas, and 2, that a single person can take 200 supplements a day. That's crazy.
But Terry, I hear what you're saying about the population growth now, but if you start allowing people to go into new bodies, means the death rate gets cut out, right?
Well, we can go in and out of bodies. We can store ourselves in whatever storage media are available in 4, 5, 6, 7 decades, and then we can choose to live inside an atom version of a body. I don't think it's a problem. But again, we're not going to have a population explosion. Population is going to level off.
Well,
There's going to be a lot of room on the planet.
so we need to turn
There's
Texas
going to be a lot more livable spaces.
We need to turn Texas into all data servers to store all the brains that are between bodies.
Excellent.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your predictions. It is now time to move on to 4 questions.
Yeah, this is the part that I listened to a couple of past episodes, kind of getting ready.
This is the segment where each of our guests face 4 rapid-fire questions about the future. Do not stop and think. Just answer with whatever comes to mind. It's free association time. And, Scott, I'll hand it over to you to start.
All right. Well, I get to ask Scott number 1. We'll call you that today.
Sure.
Your guest.
Hey,
Should be
thank
number
you.
1. You're sitting comfortably because I can see you, so I'm going to start right away. Here's your first question.
I am ready.
Can you confirm this is only because I know you're tied to NBC, so just keep that in mind. Can you confirm or deny that Al Roker is actually the leader of a group of robot weathermen patiently waiting for their government overflow programming to kick in?
I am so glad you asked this. I can confirm it, and damn NBC, it is true. I'm just putting my
You
chips on the
heard
table.
it here first on FourCast.
Absolutely true.
I knew it.
I'll take crazy questions for 200, please.
What science fiction-based tech would you like to see still developed? Something you haven't seen yet?
Phasers on stun. I mean, imagine, wars or police officers or if you could shoot, at a great distance and just stun somebody. I was never quite sure why you had phasers on kill to begin with. I mean, if you could
just mean.
stun, well, right, because if you could just stun the guy and
When you're angry.
yeah, and he would go out, you'd accomplish the same thing beyond killing him. But so phasers on stun.
That's a great idea. A whole battlefield full of phasers. No one's getting killed. They're just falling over, and whoever has the last guy standing wins.
It's like
That's
a huge
great idea.
LARPing action.
Love it. Who is a bigger threat, Pod to people or the iPod to people, and why?
God, I love my iPod. So even though I don't know any pod people myself, I'm going to go with pod people being the dangerous ones, iPod guys being the cool ones.
Fair enough. And finally, what point in the future would you like to jump into, and what would you tweet from there?
What point in the future would I like to jump into, and what would I tweet? Good Lord, these are hard. I'd like to jump ahead. This is a sappier answer than you were looking for. I'd like to jump ahead and see, my great grandchildren and tweet back their picture. Tweet back. Yeah.
I love that.
That's a good
great.
answer. Yeah, that's a great answer.
It's a father. I can totally jive with that. Very good.
As long as the future you isn't in the picture.
Right. Exactly. And then I'll tell them to buy, Google. Yeah. Well, wait, no, they tell me to buy Google. I don't know. Yeah, something would happen. Yeah.
Yes. All right, Tom,
all right, let's turn it over to you, Terry Michael. Are you sitting comfortably?
I'm very comfortable.
All right, question number one.
In my current body, with not my body.
Is the body you're wearing okay, or do you need to change? No, okay. Question number one. What politicians would you like to see rejuvenated when cryogenics becomes real? Head only, a la Futurama, or whole body?
I don't want to recycle any of our current politicians.
Could be past politicians.
Actually, that's not true. I want to recycle Thomas Jefferson. I want to go back to Jefferson and Madisonian vision of liberty. We've gone through the progressive era. We're now in an age of just populist anger. Let's go back to the founders.
So
Thomas Jefferson.
Head in a jar Thomas Jefferson, or full-bodied Thomas Jefferson?
He was full-bodied Thomas Jefferson.
He really only needs his head.
Well, we understand from reading about him that he couldn't really project. He couldn't give a speech because people couldn't hear him because he spoke so softly. So we need he needs voice training, as a matter of fact.
A press coached Thomas Jefferson.
Yes, exactly.
That would be a scary, unstoppable politician, wouldn't it?
Probably unelectable now.
Right. I don't know. Maybe. Question number two: will monarchy ever make a comeback?
Monarchy. Well, I don't know. I think anarchy is really what we're facing the future with. I don't think people want to look to one leader. I think that the era of somebody being a lawgiver and everybody falling in line behind him. When you're armed with information at the desktop, you really are not going to just look to one leader. So I don't think monarchy has a future.
Bad news for the royalist in me. All right. I think you're probably right. Question number three. If we want true liberty and a free society again, are we just going to have to leave the planet?
No, we just got to remember that we were founded by some people who really believed in individual liberty. So we go back to our roots. My argument is that the Democratic Party needs to be where I am right now. I call myself a libertarian Democrat. Government out of my bank account, away from my body, out of my bedroom, and out of the backyards of the rest of the world now. I really think that actually we're in for a libertarian future. I think we're in for a people wanting a lot more individual liberty, and we're going to demand it.
And question number four, when will your next plea for donations to the Washington Center for Politics and Journalism come?
Well, I'm glad you asked. If there's anyone out there with money, it's right now. WCPJ.org. Give now. Give till it hurts.
I have to second that as a donor to WCPJ. It's a great organization, and the money doesn't go into Terry's pocket, so I'll give a little plug there. Thank you, sir. That was a great 4 questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
And that, sadly, is the end of the show. Thank you guys for being on. This was really fun, very interesting.
It is very fun. I just want to say to all the folks who are watching, this is as awesome as you think it is. No, it seriously is. It is. I mean, I watched this online. It is that awesome. It's also freezing cold.
Are you really? I'm actually warm.
Yeah, no, if people want to know what it feels like.
You got the vent on you. That's
yeah. Oh, that's what it is. Okay, if people want to know, hey, what's it like? It's freezing.
Yeah.
And then lastly, to HBD, yes, Jesus would have root access.
One would think so, yeah. All right, well, thanks, Scott Johnson, and I thank you guys for being on. And if you've got some information you want to tell people of where they can find you online.
Sure. The easiest one is probably just to follow me on Twitter at /Scott McGrew. ScottMcGrew.net has a list of all the things I do with radio and television, so that'll work just fine.
And Terry, I know you already took one in the 4 questions, but I'll give you another chance to plug what you do for folks out there as well.
Well, actually, I don't tweet because I can't think of 140 characters. I have to think in 750 words, the old essay form. But read my essays at terrymichael.net. That's where I can think out loud and not have to be hounded by the IRS for giving an opinion, which I can't do with my 501c3. So terrymichael.net.
Scott Johnson, do we got anything else to take care of before we bug out of here?
No, but I do want to say any show where we can, within the span of 45 minutes to an hour, talk about the Dreamcast, holodecks, giant force fields, and the like is a successful hour to me. So I'm just really grateful that our guest came today and that we got to chat about some of my favorite things.
Wireless brain power and the Great Seawall of Atlantica are the two things I will take away most from this. Thanks again, you guys, for being on the show. Don't forget, you folks, you can leave comments at our website, fourcastpodcast.com, or send us an email, fourcastpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be back next week. See you then.
Bye.
But it's only 32 years away.
Nice.
All right, man.
All right, dude. Well, I'm out of here. Have fun.
Have a good one.
I think I may be seeing you later tonight.
I will see you against the Protoss and the Zerg later on this evening.
Yes, indeed. I look forward to it.